There is no single or easy solution to the massive deficits we face. But one thing we should be doing is taking a hard look at the federal budget for wasteful or unnecessary spending. Hardworking American families have to make these kind of decisions every week to make ends meet, whether it's skipping a trip to the movies or clipping coupons or paying attention to the sale ads. But in the end, by cobbling together a series of small actions, they try to get their budget back in line. And I think we in Congress should be doing the same thing. My proposal to rescind old unwanted transportation earmarks would bring down our deficit by a modest sum by Washington, D.C. standards, around $600 million, and perhaps a few billion dollars over time. But this is real money back in Wisconsin, and one step on a path that is going to have to include many additional cuts. I put together a number of proposals for where we should begin tightening our belt, including the one for this amendment and a piece of legislation I introduced last fall called the Control Spending Now Act. The combined bill would cut the federal deficit by about $500 billion over 10 years. And this amendment that's before us now would build off of a proposal put forward in President George W. Bush's fiscal year 2009 budget proposal to rescind $626 million in highway earmarks that were over a decade old and still had less than 10% of the funding utilized. When Transportation Weekly did an analysis of these earmarks at the time, they found that over 60% of the funding, $389 million, was in 152 earmarks that had no funding spent or obligated from them. These clearly are either unwanted or low priority for the designated recipients. And this is nothing against transportation funding either. I fully realize the need for investment in our crumbling infrastructure and its potential for job creation in hard-hit segments like construction. But having, Mr. President, hundreds of millions of dollars sit in an account untouched at the Department of Transportation does nothing to address our infrastructure needs, and it does nothing to put people back to work. So what I've done is build on President Bush's concept a little, and my amendment expands this rescission to all transportation earmarks that are over 10 years old with unobligated balances of more than 90%. Recently, at a hearing before the Budget Committee, I asked Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood about these unwanted and unspent earmarks and whether he supported my proposal to rescind them. Secretary LaHood responded, quote, "The answer is yes. We are supportive of your proposal, and we have identified significant millions of dollars worth of earmarks." Mr. President, it is unclear exactly how many hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars would be saved by this proposal being expanded to other transportation earmarks, in addition to the previous estimate of $626 million that would be rescinded from unwanted highway earmarks in the first year. This proposal would also be permanent, so there would likely be additional savings as the unwanted earmarks in the most recent highway bill reach their 10-year anniversary. I think this is a very modest proposal, going after just the lowest of the low-hanging fruit, and would support going even further and make it cover all of federal agencies. But with the uncertainty about how many of these unwanted and unspent earmarks there might be across the whole federal government, my amendment simply requires an annual report by the OMB to collect information from each agency and include recommendations on whether these other unobligated earmarks should also be rescinded. So as you can see, there's bipartisan support from the last two administrations for this proposal, and there is bipartisan support in this Senate for this amendment. This really shouldn't be a hard decision, and I hope to have more strong bipartisan support here in the Senate. We can't agree to take old earmarks that no one wants and use the money to pay down the deficit, then how are we ever going to get our fiscal house in order?